Hi everyone and welcome to lesson 6 of the Construct Game Dev course, where I'm going to be covering AI in games or artificial intelligence. So I'll show you in a moment where we're heading with this. So I've added a few features to the game now and I'll try and demo them very quickly. So the first, you'll notice the enemy spaceships are firing lasers, and that's kind of the challenge of today's lesson at the end. They also speed up every 3 seconds or so. You might notice they're getting faster. And lastly, it's hard to see, but when they go off screen, they're going to turn around and come back at the player. So there's kind of a lot going on there, but it's 3 main features, and then you might be surprised they're a bit easier than you might think to implement. Before I get into coding though, I'm going to introduce AI quickly, and here we go. So AI is obviously a hot topic at the moment with generative AI like ChatGPT out there. Everyone's talking about it and using it. Midjourney and others for creating art are also out there. We're not going to do anything that extreme in this lesson, but I'm going to show you a little bit about how you can use rudimentary AI in games quite effectively. So when I worked at King a while ago, King made these games like Candy Crush Saga, and also I worked on this game Shuffle Cats. And Shuffle Cats was a multiplayer card game where you played the game Rummy. Some of you might have played that against each other across the world. So that was the main gist of the game. But there was also, early in the game, there was kind of a training mode or a tutorial mode. You'd play against AI characters or bots. And they had this kind of like dumb sort of AI that was kind of relatively basic, but when you played against them, it felt like you were playing a real player. So much so that actually we had real players, so our players all around the world, some of them would actually complain to us because they believed that when they were playing someone online, that they were actually playing an AI who was just like too good at the game. But that wasn't happening. The AI was only controlling these characters from the game. And if they were playing someone that felt like AI, I think they were just playing someone who was a really good player of the game. Anyway, all I want to say about this briefly is that the AI to control the bots was quite basic, and basically what it did was it used random numbers, kind of like rolling a dice. So for example, you can imagine like the AI in the game rolling a dice and saying, okay, if I get the number 1 on the 6-sided die, then I'm going to play the good cards in my hand. But if I don't get the 1, then I'm just going to play any random card, or if I don't get the 1, then I'm going to skip a turn, or draw and miss this turn. So that was how it worked. Basically, it just used random numbers to decide whether to play good cards or not. And you'll see soon that random numbers can be used quite effectively to make AI that seems quite real to players. Right. So let's jump in. Okay, so the first thing I want to do here is to have these enemy spaceships facing the player sometimes. So specifically when the enemy spaceship goes outside the layout, I want it to face the player and then head towards the player. I'd also like to make it so that if we create any new spaceships, they have a random angle. So when they appear, they're kind of facing some direction, but not always the same. So I'll add that as well. So then the first thing I'm going to need to do is go into my enemy section. I'm going to add above this thing about the layout, so outside the layout. When it goes outside the layout, then I would like to face the enemy ship, set angle towards the player. Player.x and player.y, just like we did with the mouse input for the player. Player.y. Okay, so that's part 1. And I'll do this other bit where when they are created, they are randomly set to another angle. So I'll do that now. So when the enemy when they're created, then we go, we set in the angle, we're just going to set it to a random thing. So we'll go like this, random number between 0 and 360 degrees. Yeah. Okay. And that'll mean that when they're created, they're facing some angle. Right, so let's play it and just test that quickly. So this one here, when it goes off the screen, by the way, if you haven't got a spaceship that's close to the edge of the screen, probably a good idea to add one, should come back when it goes outside. Yeah, there it is. Makes me want to, maybe I should have sped up the game a bit before I tested that. But yep, so that seems to be working. Okay, we can't test the creation yet, but we'll get to that later. All right, so that was the first step. And now I'd like to also speed up those enemies. So that as time goes on in the game, they get faster and the game gets a bit more hectic. Yeah, makes it a bit more action shooterish. So in order to do that, we're going to need to add something here called a timer to the enemies. So if I select all the enemies like this, then I can add a timer to all of them by doing this. Okay. And I can't do much with that here, but in the code I'll start using that. So again, when the enemy is created, this is where I can set up a timer. What is a timer? So a timer is kind of what it sounds like. It's like a stopwatch. And what's going to happen is when an enemy is created, there's going to be a stopwatch button press, which starts the timer running. And then after a certain amount of time, say 3 seconds, then the stopwatch will complete, and it will trigger something to happen in the game. And if you can guess what I'm going to make happen, when the time is up for that timer, I'm going to speed up the enemy slightly so that it chases the player more quickly. Okay. So yeah, so the first thing I need to do is set up that timer when the enemy is created. So I need to go on enemy created, enemy timer, and I'm going to start the timer, like I said, like a stopwatch. I'm going to set it to 3 seconds. Why not? I'm going to make it regular, which means it repeats. So the timer repeats every 3 seconds. Every 3 seconds, it's going to trigger the speed up. So the enemy is going to get faster and faster and faster. And I'm going to give it a name. So the name of this timer, we'll use this in a moment. You'll see why we give it a name. I'm going to call it a speed up. Okay. So we created that timer, but we now need to do the triggering of it. We need to, do something when it finishes. So in order to do that, I'm going to add above. I'm going to say enemy red timer. So on timer, and which one am I looking for? This is when the speed up timer is finished. Remember, it happens every 3 seconds now. Then I can do something. So now I'm going to add an action. So when the time is done, this happens. So what happens is it's going to, for the enemy, it's going to access this bullet behavior. I'm going to set the speed of the bullet, and I'm going to add say 50 to the current speed of the bullet or of the enemy. Sorry. So I'm going to enemy red dot bullet dot speed, and now I'm going to add something to that, and I'm just going to add 50 because I know I've tried this before and 50 seems to work quite well. Okay, so every 3 seconds they should speed up. Let's just test this out and see what happens. Yeah, there they are going faster, and now another 3 seconds they're getting faster. Okay, that's good. So that seems to work quite well. Okay, so see what I mean about AI? Like, AI doesn't have to be extremely complicated. You can achieve AI with relatively basic building blocks. And just remember this random thing. This is used a lot in games, particularly with AI. All right, so the next thing I'd like to do now is to make the enemies kind of evade. So if the player would shoot at an enemy, I'd like the enemies to sometimes try and dodge the lasers. Okay. So one kind of clever way to do that is to add like a ray pointing out of the the laser. So when we shoot a laser at the enemy, what we can do is we can kind of add this imaginary imaginary ray in front of it that won't be visible. But when the enemies see that imaginary ray, then they can like decide to move in a different direction. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to add that ray. So I'm going to go insert new object, sprite again, and I'm going to put it up here, and I will just draw a little box to represent this. So yeah, something like this, just a thin rectangle. Yep, that's good. I'll squish this down. I'll just check where the center of it is. Yeah, make sure the center is roughly in the center. And yeah, let's have a look at that. Yeah, so that's going to be my ray sticking out of the laser. I might actually just put the laser over this side. Yep, like this. Like this. Cool. And then, sorry, I'll zoom in a little bit. Okay, now I need to make that ray a child of the lasers, or the parent, sorry, or the laser a parent of the ray. So I'm going to select them both by holding Shift. I'm going to right click on the laser and say hierarchy, add this to selection. So now the ray is a child of the laser. And then I can click on the laser and select this hierarchy mode and set it to wrap, which means that now the ray will move around with the laser. Okay, so just to be clear about what I meant before, so now what I'm saying is when this laser fires out of the player, and say it's going towards this spaceship here, when the spaceship sees the ray, I want the spaceship to kind of move in a different direction to try and evade. And this won't be visible in the game, by the way, this ray. But of course, if the laser still hits the enemy's still destroyed. I'm thinking that I want my ray to be longer, actually, because I can see already that if it's not going to be long enough. So I'm going to change that way. So I'm going to have to shift select one of these, come back down here. Oh no, I can just double click on it now. Yeah, I can double click on it. I'm going to resize this. Yeah, cool, and make it like 500 long. Make sure that's unchecked. 20 is fine. So, okay. Yep. Close that. Does that look better? Just make sure. Ah, yeah, this is where I need to be. So shift select. I need to unhook this hierarchy thing so I can move it forward. Yep. And then I can now go back and put this back to wrap so they move together. And that looks like it might be kind of effective, long enough to kind of warn the enemy to get out of the way, you know. All right, so now I need to write some code around that. So if you might have guessed that I'm going to add another on-enemy collision thing. So I'll add it down here, add above enemy on collision with, and I'm going to choose the, I forgot to name it, so I should probably go and do that. So I'll just quickly rename that thing. So this is the F2 to rename enemy. Sorry, this is the laser. No, I'll call it the projectile ray. Projectile ray. Yep. So when the enemy collides with a projectile ray, you don't want the enemy to try and evade the laser. So all I need to do is to now set the set the angle again. Set angle. Hang on. No, let's do the bullet. Let's set the bullet angle of motion. Yeah, this is the one I want. And I want to set it like, what do I want to do? I could set it to just a random number the whole way around, 360 degrees. But maybe if I kind of set it like that, what am I doing with my fingers? Somewhere between like here and all the way around the back. So the enemy is going to try and like go like here or there, but it's not going to like go between those top angles. All right, so yeah, I'm going to do that. So random, so choose these numbers, and I think they're going to be like roughly like 60 degrees and 300 degrees, something like that. So set the angle of motion. So let's try that out. No. What have I missed here? So on collision with the ray. Yeah, I forgot. So I forgot that when the player fires one of these lasers, it needs to include that projectile ray. So with that left mouse button, so it's going to spawn. Yeah. So these two guys here need to spawn and create hierarchy. Create hierarchy will add the projectile ray that we just added to the layout. So let's make that true for both. And now we'll see that projectile ray fly across the screen, which we can make invisible in a moment. Yeah, there we go. So it's kind of good for testing it to see where it is. But, and it's working, but the real test is when you just, make it invisible. So if I can click on that, remember if I want to just select one side of it, I need to shift select until you get the ray selected, and then you can go all the way down here and make it initially invisible. Okay, so now they won't show up, but the enemies are still trying to. Cool. So yeah, play with that, tinker with those values, and see how you get on. And I've kind of shown you enough there to do the challenge, I think. So see what I mean? Like we've done some basic AI, and it was just adding a few little tweaks. And the challenge I'm going to set you now combines some of the techniques I just showed you. So here's the challenge, is to make the enemies shoot at the player. Okay, so I want you to duplicate or add a new laser object to the layout and call it enemy laser. So be careful that you can't just use the existing laser in your game. You need to create a new one or copy the old one, okay, and call it enemy laser. Add a timer behavior to all enemies. Add a start timer action to the enemy on the created event. Set it to regular or repeat every 3 to 5 seconds, and then tag that timer shoot. So this timer is set up so that every 3 to 5 seconds, those enemies are going to shoot they're just going to shoot a laser. Then add an enemy on timer shoot event with an action that spawns that enemy laser. And then go ahead and test it and adjust the shoot timer to how you like it. And lastly, don't forget that you'll need to handle all the damage that comes when those enemy lasers hit your player and the shield. So you'll have to add on collision events to both your shield and the player for that new enemy laser. Okay. All right. Have fun, everyone, and I hope you enjoy your playing with AI. I hope that wasn't too challenging for you and you got somewhere with it. If you did get a little bit stuck, I'll show you now the code that I've got. So my one looks something like this. So enemy lasers, where are they? So like I said, the enemies now have a timer, and all of them do actually, so I can just select them from here. So all enemies have a timer. So since all enemies already have a timer, I was able to just add another action here to start another timer and call it shoot. So I tagged it shoot, it's regular, and it has a duration between 2 and 5 seconds. I think I said 3 and 5 in the slide, but I like 2 and 5. And then when that timer here is triggered, so on the enemy red timer shoot completion, then this action spawns the enemy laser to shoot it from the enemy. And yeah, there's nothing too tricky about that. And yeah, I added a little bit of randomness to my collision with the projectile ray as well for when the enemies evade. So I may as well explain that. So when my enemies collide with that projectile ray, so when they know the bullets are coming, the lasers, then there's a random number that says, so there's another subcondition that says, well, if a random number between 0 and 1, so create a random number between 0 and 1, and if it's greater than 0.5, so saying half the time, if it's greater than 0.5, then the enemy can change its angle and try to evade. But half the time it won't, this won't be true, so it's not, half the time the enemies will just stay on course and probably get hit by the bullet. So it just makes it feel a bit more realistic, I guess. Or a bit more fair, maybe. So I think that's it. Yeah, I think that is all I need to show you. Oh, yeah, of course. Not quite. So yeah, I did have to add in the handling here for when the shield is struck by enemy laser. That's sort of almost exactly the same code, except that the enemy laser is destroyed, and of course when the player is hit with the enemy laser as well, and the player is destroyed. So yeah, I added those 2 blocks. Okay, cool. Thanks everyone, and I hope you enjoyed this. I'll catch you next time.